had our reporters out in the field, bringing us ball by ball commentary and updates as well as the votes were being taken. A very, very interesting time as well. As we look at 2025. We've had elections in the past, yes. We've always had elections. I think going back to 1956, 1970, coming all the way up, we've had elections. But I think this election, a lot of people are seeing this election as one that is really, really of interest. And we try to get some perspective on what we would have, experienced today. Even in terms of the lead up to the election. Now I have two gentlemen in studio who I have invited to just give some perspectives, some views, not necessarily to look at results. We won't get results, in the next hour or so. We may have some preliminary figures, but in terms of the final, we won't get that until, I suppose, by tomorrow, because it's a process that has to be gone through. But I think, in fairness, we can have a view, we can have a perspective, especially when we look at what has happened in terms of the voting, the campaigning, the mood, and of course, I think that would also be of benefit. And this can probably be part one of a 2 or 3 part program that we can have. So we want to nonetheless have the discussion. I have with me live in studio Sir Timothy Hamel-Smith, no stranger to our frequencies, and of course Sir Michael Anisette, someone who is well known in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of labor matters. He has championed the cause of labor for so many decades, and his voice is always heard, and I suppose always important as it speaks to the issue of labor. And governance as well. And so Timothy Hamel-Smith, he's also an expert in parliamentary business, being a former President Senate of the Senate, and of course, who have had also some exposure in the governance and the politics of Trinidad and Tobago. Gentlemen, let's get into the program. It's going to be an open discussion, and of course, the mics are open. The mics are all yes open, and I want to welcome you both as we have this sort of general discussion, of course, with some perspectives and so on. Your Excellency, let me just welcome you again to our program. And as I said, you're no stranger to our frequencies.
All right, great to be here. This is an important, a pivotal moment in our history.
Yes.
And I think that is an opportunity, I think, to speak to the public before the results come out.
Yes, indeed. And again, my dear friend, Michael Anisette. Brother Anisette, welcome again.
My pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure.
All right, great. Now, well, it is, it's 6 o'clock, so it means that the polls would have closed, and of course, everyone is waiting with bated breath, including yourselves. I'm also, keen to get an idea as to what the results are. But the focus this evening is not necessarily, because as I said, we don't have the results. But I wanted to get a perspective from you gentlemen as to what you thought the campaigning was like, the mood, where you think we are going as a country, and what do you expect could possibly, be the future of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to start the discussion with, getting a response from Your Excellency Timothy Hamel-Smith.
Well, I think what we have seen is some wide swings in terms of the mood. From my perspective, it started off really when Dr. Rowley decided he would step back from the arena. Fitzgerald Hines had also been eliminated, if you like. And that sensed, that to my mind was a good political strategy because the angst of the public were focused on 3 ministers as far, Dr. Rowley, Fitzgerald Hines, Colm Imbert, who was later demoted. So you can see that it started off, and I thought that it sent signals that something new was happening.
A new chapter?
A new chapter, if you like, and we'll see if that, what there is in that chapter to see. But that's how it started. That was, and why I say it widely swung. The election was called very early.
Yes.
Without, I thought Mr. Young would have taken a 3-month period to
honeymoon period,
having
yes.
be seen in the public as Prime Minister.
But was that a strategy in itself?
Well, I don't know. That to me, that sent a signal that perhaps there was some panic on the PNM side, on the governance side, because you weren't sure that, it didn't go across as smoothly as perhaps it was expected. So it sent that signal as well, that, look, let the forces close ranks, because that's what happens when you call an election. Okay. And let me not take a chance to push it down further down the road. And it was thought that the PNM had got that advantage. The surprising thing from my perspective is the UNC seemed more prepared than the PNM for the election. I really think their marketing was really first class. I think they outdid the PNM in terms of marketing. And you got that swing, which is why I've seen it. And then it sort of came back to rest in the middle, which makes it so difficult now to predict the outcome of this election.
Too close to call.
Right? But we swung into, my sense is, we swung in two different directions. So we've now come back to rest. From my personal perspective, when I went to the polling station this morning, and what I'm hearing from different sources, that the turnout was above average, was more than was expected. That sends another signal altogether, because I think in the past people, there were two senses. There was a sense that people said they're going to stay away from the polls because they're so disenchanted, but on the other hand, we have had low voter turnouts, and anything which increases that voter turnout is a good sign. As to what the outcome is going to be is a whole different perspective.
I will come back to that. Brother Anisette, your views, your perspectives, you've seen, you've listened, and you've read all that pertains to the lead-up of the election today. And while we are not, we don't have the results just as yet, give us a view as to, what you felt and in terms of the direction you believe that the country is really going right now.
The direction is almost, frightening in my humble view. And while I heard my little friend made some pronouncement, I think that he missed out a fundamental issue. That while we had a prime ministerial change, there is still a political leader of the party who stepped down as the prime minister, which is something new, which creates, in my humble view, some issues that we must look at. Because if you are stepping out, you are stepping out. All right. Why do you want to hold on to the political leadership, right, of the party? And from where I sit on my conversations, my lone friend was correct to say that people were dissatisfied with the leadership of the PNM. All right, and I think that this election is going to make or break based on the population's view as to whether or not they want to continue under the leadership of Dr. Rowley, who in my humble view would have created a lot of enemies. He would have mashed a lot of cons. And as I said in one of my presentations, that the government pick a fight with the Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union and dock workers. And I believe that is a mistake that the present government will live to regret. Because you cannot disrespect and disown the constitutional requirement for collective bargaining and then, change the tune, because the truth is not something that you could massage. The truth is neutral, and therefore you cannot edit it to reflect what you want to do as opposed to what is the truth. So I wait with a bated breath to see what is the outcome. And just like my learned friend here, there's a big turnout, and that suggests to me something, so that people are making up their minds, because traditionally people used to get fed up, I'm not going and I'm vote. But there is this conscious decision now to go out and vote. And I agree that the messaging of the UNC was on target, people-centered.
They ran a ground campaign as opposed to the other major parties.
The traditional campaign that we would have seen run by the other parties.
But what would you have made of the platform presentations? I've heard it said that we have not been dealing with issues. It's been more like, mudslinging and getting into people's private, lives and even the Council of, for political behavior, I had some concerns about, the mode and the direction in which the campaign have gone. Let me just turn, to Your Excellency. You'll probably be, a person best to understand these things and to help us through, because I know that you've been part of, the reform of so many different things within, our parliamentary system.
Well, yes, the campaigns. One, I thought the marketing campaign of the UNC surpassed that of the PNM, who were playing a catch-up game, which made them look like they were coming from behind, which that certainly was not the agenda. There is, I think Comrade is right when he says we're facing a very uncertain future. Yeah. I understand that the public were angry with Dr. Rowley, Mr. Imbert, Mr. Hines, but I thought that was a real move to take yourself out of the picture. Who do you throw mud at when the three of them left the scene, as it were? I didn't see Mr. Imbert on any platform, so I take it he was told,
to stay, just take it here,
stay undercover. I don't think they wanted him to take a constituency at all. And I've heard, so when I talked about in terms of the voter turnout, I'm not in a marginal constituency to talk personally. I think it's considered a fair PNM stronghold. It's Dr. Rowley's own constituency, and what I saw there was a voter turnout, and I'm hearing the same thing throughout the country, in Tobago as well. That in fact the voter turnout, this surprises me. I thought people might have been disenchanted, but in fact they've come out to make a statement. I don't know what that statement is as yet.
Well, we'll find out.
My comrade knows more than me, but
we'll find out.
Yes, time will tell.
Let me just go back to Comrade Ansett. We have also heard about, when we look at that young vote, the question has always been, in the past that young people have been just disinterested, not interested in politics, and I'm getting the feeling that maybe 2025 we might be seeing a shift, because people are more educated. This is not 1962. There is the internet, there's the information highway, so people have access to to more information that they had before. Your view on this young vote that we always talk about, and always political parties have always strategized in terms of getting that young vote. Your views on where we are right now in 2025.
Okay, what I would want to say is that they are traditional voters. You could say what they want to say. Die-hard PNM, die-hard UNC members, and we have seen a dropping off of the tree of some of those so-called die-hard members, and I think that the youths, they are going to make a difference. And then what I'm seeing is the participation of the youths, even though if it's on the cultural arena, right, with making songs, singing songs, but there's a phenomena that I have witnessed that I've never seen, and I have seen a kind of transition from the race voting where I am UNC, I am PNM, and I've seen a lot of young people transitioning to the UNC, although the PNM have, but unlike what we used to see in terms of the turnout of the population, it is something that we must pay attention to.
So you've seen a shift in perspective, you've seen a shift in terms of, how people see, the society and their leaders and so on. I think it was Winston Duguran who talked about, new politics. Is that what we are seeing now, Your Excellency? New politics?
Well, it may be a touch on. I don't think it's what what Professor Duguran thought would happen, but you actually got a sense of panic on the part of the PNM because the UNC were touching the youth. Yellow is a code was a marvelous. Don't come on, whatever you might say. That touched
and there was an interesting
youth.
jingle as well.
Yeah, and their jingles and people singing songs about it. The PNM there was a certain angst on their part, expressing dissatisfaction. How could the UNC? Don't listen to the UNC. They're trying to fool your young people, and that is really a panic. And I don't know what extent the young people will play a part. It would be good to have statistics, but I don't think it results throw up that necessarily. But as to how many young people have decided to vote. So if our voter turnout is increased, maybe in fact a large percentage of that is coming from the youth.
Yes.
Where else would it have come from? I thought the UNC managed to reach out, touch the youth, and the PNM were annoyed that they were using who they felt were their people, as it were, don't take money from them. But it demonstrated a move. I think this particular election demonstrates, I think, a transition period, and we are pivoting to something else in our election campaigns.
All right. This is a special discussion on the 2025 general election. I have with me live in studio Sir Timothy Hamel-Smith and, of course, Michael Anisette. And what we're going to do, gentlemen, we're going to just take a short break, and when we come back, Sir Anisette, I want to also open the next session when we return after the break to talk about, what we call, these smaller parties. We are now hearing about a coalition of interests, and of course we've had, groupings coming together. I wanted to talk with you on that, your view on that, as to, whether Trinidad and Tobago is ready for that kind of, grouping, coming together, amalgamation, whatever name that you'd want to call it. And I'll also get some perspective from Your Excellency when we come back. So we take a short break and come right back.
Trinidad and Tobago, I have sat where you have sat, and like you, I have been seen licking my fingers after the delicious KFC meal, because we, the citizens, deserve all 11 herbs and spices.
Crunch into the KFC ballot box and get 8 pieces of chicken with 2 large fries for only $139.95. Offer available via the KFC TT app and in-store kiosks only. This is a limited time offer.
Vote for finger-licking goodness today with the KFC ballot box.
Dancers, David Dance is here again. Youth for Christ Trinidad and Tobago presents Dance as David Dance 2025. Date, Saturday 3rd May. Time, 3 p.m. Venue, Palms Club San Fernando. Kids, $25. Adults, $35. Come and be blessed. It's gonna be a blast.
Do you have a passion for technology? Prepare yourself for the digital world. Gain practical, cutting-edge, futuristic skills and become globally employed or open your own business. Register now for the Anglia-Ruskin University BSc Honours Applied Computer Science. Learn to build computers and networks, e-commerce websites for online shopping, databases, mobile apps, gain practical skills in ethical hacking and countermeasures, cloud computing, biometric image processing, and much more. Flexible entry requirements with CXC, CSEC, CAPE, or work experience. Classes offered exclusively at the School of Accounting and Management North or South Campus, or 100% online. For more information, call now or visit SAM's website at www.samtt.com.
welcome back to this special program as we focus on the general election 2025. I have with me live in studio two gentlemen, Timothy Hamel-Smith and Mr. Michael Anisette, giving us their perspectives, doing a bit of a reflection on the day's polling as well as the lead up to this very important poll. Gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Mr. Anisette, we have focused a lot in terms of the national conversation on what we call coalition, these groupings coming together. I know that even the United National, Opposition United National Congress has gone into, I don't know, an accommodation. What is it? I'm trying to understand exactly, to find the right term. But I know that we are talking about this business of coalition of interests. What do you see, for Trinidad and Tobago? Would there be a time when we can really see? I think it was A.N.R. Robinson talked about a party of parties. Would there ever be a time where you think that we can really see Trinidad and Tobago as the constituency and not have these different labels and names? Because what that does, it tends to to further, in my view, polarize the society, where you have you have these little groupings come together, but then there is a group that feels disenfranchised in some way. As we look at the politics, your view on coalition, politics and these kinds of arrangements, which ever so often you hear about, not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but in many other parts of the world.
That's a new phenomenon that is developing. Not, as you rightly said, not only in Trinidad, but generally over the globe and the world in the context of politics. And therefore, we need to understand our culture as a people to understand whether or not that kind of concept in reality going to be cemented in our politics. And as you rightly said, there are so many different groupings. All right, but I want to raise a fundamental point, because the issue of wealth inequality, all right, it is something that is real in Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore we could have no amount of coalitions of parties. You must address that particular issue, the question of the social cohesion metrics and trust in our institution. It has fallen down in Trinidad and Tobago, and those are real issues that we need to talk about as a society, as opposed to coalition of interests, because I believe we have to have what I want to call our collective wisdom coming to bear on the issues, and to be honest with ourselves, as I say, to democratize democracy in Trinidad and Tobago, whereby one is free to express him or herself without being targeted as an enemy of the PNM or the UNC, or as the case may be. Those are fundamental issues that I believe that must be addressed. And when we look at the coal algorithm, inevitability, all right, as it relates to where the economy is going, where the economy is heading, because there are a lot of people who have been left behind. And I wish to make it abundantly clear that what I would want to call dictatorial imposition of the 4% over a 6-year period would have created a lot of issues. And how do you justify that you were in power and you allow workers to work on 2010 salary, 2014 salaries, and you only address people who are willing to accept your proposal, as opposed to looking at the various institutions and places of work in a particular way, so we could find the kind of formula, because one hat in terms of wages doesn't fit everybody. And therefore, yes, there is a need for the coming together of our collective wisdom to put Trinidad and Tobago first. That is
yes.
my humble view, right? Because it cannot be UNC, it cannot be PNM. And PNM has made the mistake to believe that they could go it alone. No political party, given the transition and the changes that I'm witnessing in Trinidad and Tobago, can sit down comfortably and say, well, I could go it alone. That is a misrepresentation of the realities as I see it based on our social, economic issues in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. Excellency, the issue of coalition politics, or what we are seeing now, a new term that I only learned some months ago, a coalition of interests. Help us understand or give your perspective on this. Do you see that there is a value, there is a way that we can work together and in the interest of the public and just see beyond just party lines?
Yeah. So I think what Comrade Anisette raised is certainly a definitive issue, this question of inequality. But that, in fact, is no different from what Mr. Dukaran kept saying. Trinidad will not rise unless Lavanti rises. Lavanti was just a euphemism for our deprived communities. And, it can't be, we will, as a nation, we will not rise, in fact, if we leave extremes of poverty and extremes of wealth, because it's not that you want to go after somebody, one or the other, but you need to give, I think, opportunities, and that's where I think that political, hopefully, governments in the future, because I don't think that people want handouts. Handouts are in fact, the sort of patronage society we've created is what have kept them deprived and downtrodden. We need a hand up, not a handout. And how do you do that? Is through the education system, through reskilling, through upskilling, through bringing into our education system. We've taken an education system and told our students, you must fit into this, instead of fitting the education system to fit the people. Because I'm so, there are different intelligences out there, and none is less than the other. The ability to get into technology. I remember that story, Anne Robinson, President Robinson, telling me, his daughter telling me she was working as a teacher in one of the challenged communities. And she said, we brought in somebody to teach software programming. And she says, you cannot believe it. The students who caught on, who became enveloped in it, were the students who were dropping out. If they weren't, they're virtually dropping out. Because we keep pushing just an academic education, when in fact people have different and just as beneficial capabilities that we must. So that I think that closing those gaps is essential. But as you go along, then of course it does raise the question of how do various, in a plural society.
And the sustainability of it as well. In terms of, if you're talking politics, we've seen where there have been so many fragmentations. People get into these accommodations type arrangements, and then a year, 2-3 years, well, not even as far as 3 years, there are issues.
Sure, but in a plural society.
While it's good, what you're saying, I think it's fraught with some challenges along the way.
And I give you that, but if you look at our electoral past, if you look at 1981, if you look at 1991, if you look at 2007, when 23% of your population, rather of your voters, 23 people voted for a particular party that had no representation in Parliament, then it means that they didn't go away. That constituency is still around. It's just they're not represented.
Yes, not represented.
So whilst you might say that, these splinter parties, yes, they form coalition of interests or whatever you want to call it, they're likely to break up, is what you're saying. And that is because the electoral system is really where the change must come from. So if there was proportional representation, I wouldn't have a pre-election coalition.
Okay.
I would have my coalition post.
Already, yes.
And at that point, I would be saying, as what happens in Europe, what I would be saying, look, these are my policies, these are my plans,
There's no need for,
this is my vision.
Yeah.
What is yours?
Yeah.
Can we marry these two
Right.
things? And which of mine will you accept? And then we'll feel content that we achieved
And we are fully
our
represented.
objective.
Yes.
And unless Trinidad and Tobago does that in a plural society, you have disenfranchised 23% of your population. And you might say, any wonder that the numbers participating in elections become less. And, people don't feel part of it, so I might as well stand back and let me look after myself.
Yes.
That's what you create.
All right, let me come back to what Annie said. You, I know, have been for decades an advocate for labor matters. You fought many battles, I know. I mean, we go back quite some time. I remember, the marches and so on. In terms of labor's, and this is sort of a broad, perspective. In terms of labor's involvement in the political, arena, I've heard the criticism that have come, against labor. But why are you guys in politics? You shouldn't be in politics. You represent, and you shouldn't be partisan. But I've also heard it said, and to be fair, that labor by very nature is a political machinery. We go back to the days of Butler. We go back to the days of Renzi. We go back to the days of there's another name that escapes me now. But you're in the defense of those criticism, Mr. Annie said, help us to give us a clear perspective as to how you see, labor being part of this whole political process.
Well, labor is the political process in my humble view. You understand? Not part. It is the political process, but I also want to enhance the point by saying there's a symbiotic relationship between labor and capital. All right, given how our society operates, and therefore I am saying that we have to look at our history, and we have to understand our history. And why talk about Trinidad and Tobago, but across the Caribbean, labor and politics were merged because coming out of labor and politics, a lot of prime ministers before, even Eric William courted the trade union movement. All right. So when we look at the Bustamantes, the Michael Manley, all right, the Shedi Jagan, who at one time was a socialist, and we know what happened. All right, when you look at the Ambaros, when you look at the Marishaws and all these leaders, they came out of the bowel of the trade union movement. And as a consequence, there is this relationship between labor and politics, because politics is life. Politics is what dictates what happened to me, what happened to my learned friend here, what decisions are made by the politicians affects me, and I'm therefore, if I'm not part of that process, well, then the question of democracy, right, is up in the air. And I'm there for anybody to say that the trade union movement, which is the working class, should not be in politics, does not understand the history of the Caribbean as it relates to labor and politics, as has been demonstrated through the Caribbean region.
All right. This is a special edition of the election 2025. We are having a general discussion. Of course, the focus this evening is not necessarily to talk about results, as I said before. That will come a little later on, and sure, we probably have an opportunity to have another program when we have the results and we can sit back and really do a proper and deep, clinical analysis of what would have happened. But I wanted to also talk about, Trinidad and Tobago in the global context, whichever party, Your Excellency, wins this general election would have to treat with some global issues. We're talking tariffs. We're talking. It's a different kind of environment for which Trinidad and Tobago is in now. This is not 1962. It's not 1970. We have a president of the United States who've come with some really, draconian measures in terms of how he sees, America. He talks about America first and all of that. Trinidad and Tobago at this juncture obviously would have to have a particular type of leadership to be able to take us, into a direction that we all would be pleased and the direction for which we all would want to go. Your views on looking into the future. Whoever wins by tomorrow we get the results. What do you think are some of the issues?
Well, certainly the world is changing dramatically. I mean, President Trump, when he came in and he imposed these huge tariffs, has caused a huge the creation of blocks, really. So people are saying, they are getting together with whether it's Europe or China and the Asian countries. You find people are creating blocks. And what I would say to you, the Caribbean needs to align itself with a bloc
and that's what I was
represents its interests.
And that's the direction I was going in. But
yes.
I wanted you to
so
as to whether we should be seeing ourselves as going it alone.
Absolutely not.
The sustainability
we have
of
to
it,
work with. So Canada
is going to be a responsibility of whichever government comes into office.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Canada is a particular, possibly a partner, but South America as well, whether it's Colombia, Brazil, that we could work with. Brazil is part of the BRICS, as it were. What will the currency be? Will, in fact, we go to blockchain? It's hard to predict what the future will be. I don't think Trinidad and Tobago can stand alone. And this is a time to have somebody in your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You need to be outward looking and not just inward looking. We need to create alliances where strategic with our Caribbean brothers and sisters, but also with those countries that, the Caribbean is small. We have to accept that we don't have that much influence in determining how we react to tariffs.
Now, there's a boast, there has been a boast of, Trinidad and Tobago punching above its weight when we look at, for example, the energy sector.
Sure.
Is that of much, you said the world is changing. The U.S. has, deep deposits of oil and what have you. Is that
the ideal would be, in fact, if we could have relationships with Venezuela that would not upset the United States.
Is a sore point
because that is probably where
yes.
our future gas is one thing to. Yes, we were punching above our weight. We were doing well in LNG. We were doing well. We were the world's largest exporter of ammonia up to not too long ago. Methanol. We were really doing good. In a sense, we had created two work cultures, if I may say that. My friend would not take objection. But the thing is, we could have aspired to a higher level of productivity. And with that, of course, the employment becomes more stable.
Yes,
it becomes
more
better returns in terms of what one earns. And that is where we need to be pushing Trinidad and Tobago, because we did have, uniquely in the Caribbean, I think we had created, in the Point Lisas Industrial Estate, you actually have to have a passport showing that you are safe and productive workers. You can't get inside there.
Let me just go. Let me just make that segue into, and I think this falls into your area too. So I said, we have, you and I, we've had, lots of discussion about this business, even the issue of profit sharing and, one being able to be looking at productivity. And there's always been a fight as well, even from the state, as to whether unions are even relevant. We talk about decertification and all of those things that unions have marched against, Your view on that perspective, and maybe some recommendations as to where you believe we can even further strengthen labor and by extension the labor movement.
All right, let me first say, and I like to look at history, because history is a teacher to us. And I have no issues with Trump, because America in 2026 is going to be celebrating 250 years, all right, of independence. And if you look at history, the Ottoman Empire, if you look at England, all these societies, all right, Spain, after two, even Rome, after 250, 251 years, it is a mathematical reality that society comes to an end, and we are seeing that right in America, because all this talk about the tariff, you see a pushback, and then you say, all right, it's 10% across the board. China is saying, listen, hey, I'm a big power, and I'm not going to negotiate with you unless or until you remove all the tariffs. That tells you something. And then we have the BRIC nation, and we have the South-South trade, all right, which Trinidad can vie to. But having said that, we have to build the kind of infrastructure. We have to build the kind of educational system that is real, all right, and it's not only academia I am talking about, because there are different kinds of educational systems that is required, because right now you cannot get a good plumber in Trinidad and Tobago.
Indeed, yes. There's coding, there's cognitive reasoning, there's emotional intelligence.
All right, so all these things, right, must be looked at in a holistic way in order for us to make the kind of transition that is necessary. And I will continue to say, until we recognize that is Trinidad first and not profit first. All right, it is Trinidad first and not, well, I just want to get money and I don't want to work for the pay that I am getting, right? It is Trinidad first when we continue to have a URP system that doesn't reward workers in any meaningful way or develop any kinds of skills that is necessary. Is a make job payment, which, I mean, it was condemned by the PNM at one time, okay? And therefore, but when they get into power, they enhance it more. And those are the fundamental problems. And let us, excuse me, speak truth to power. I will want to use an example, and I hope the listening public will understand where I am coming from a labor perspective. Let us look at Dubai.
That's which has always been,
let us look at
marker. We've always talked about Dubai.
No, yes. I want to look at it from the context of when we started to deal with oil in Trinidad and Tobago, and when Dubai started. Look at where Dubai is, because 20% of Dubai populations is people who born in Dubai. The others are imported from other questions. But oil was very critical to Dubai, and they used the oil to develop Dubai. But oil is now 3% of the GDP in Dubai, and we are still from 1917 holding on to oil and gas. Resource, yes. And if anybody talk about diversification, right, our Prime Minister say, diversification. But diversification is a reality in any country that has developed. You cannot have an economic egg in one basket and expect your economy to grow. Where is the initiative to increase the manufacturing industry? Where is the initiative to increase our culture? Our culture can generate funds, carnival, and
but there have been lots of discussion about growth poles. I've heard a lot of that. There was discussion about the shipping industry, There was concern about even agriculture, boosting agriculture. I think every budget. But if you look, quite interestingly, if you look at several budgets going back, maybe about 5 budgets, agriculture has been given very, very, very minuscule, 1 point something, 0 point something. But what I'm getting at is that what has become of or should we have something in place to ensure that these things that our leaders and politicians talk about, that they in fact have these things, not just as a speech or as a recommendation, but have them implement. I'm hearing about a Ministry of Implementation. Is that the answer, Your Excellency? Do you think that, do you have confidence that has been recognized, and maybe we need to go by the way of having these things in place that we always talk about? Good, nice plans.
But the fair is, of course, when you mention implementation, we'll shut down the whole service, public service. But certainly, we do need to have not just implementation, but you want to cut out unnecessary bureaucurity.
Yeah,
you want to cut down the red tape, cut out the red tape. And unless we do that, we don't get a return for our money. And one of the things I would like to see, and one of the things I think the Prime Minister should have done, is to have pay for performance. So he should have taken 4%. And said, but if I perform, I will get another 40%. Why should that not be the case for politicians? Lead the way.
And I know Mr. Anisette is raring to respond. I've seen the reports. Some unions have been accepting, the 4% and the 5 and the 3 and what have you. But and again, it comes back to the question of fairness, social justice, Mr. Anisette. I'll come back to you in just a while. But let me allow you to complete your point.
I think the question of pay for performance is pivotal to move us to another level. All right. So that if I really perform, and of course you want to set targets, you want to have criteria by which I reach there. I lived through that. When in 1991 we took over, if you remember, Grace was there. We had the OWTU. We came in there and we said, look, we needed to change things around. We had far too much staff, but we had voluntary separation plans. We were totally unsafe. And everybody laughed at us and said, there's a Trini way. We're not interested in safety. But the truth is, we brought in people, we told the supervisors, we want you out in the field, not in your office. And we got safety down to 0 lost time injuries per million man hours. And the next thing we did was bring in pay for performance. And I know the staff, when we put it up on the board, because we were very transparent, every month you could go on the board and see where are we. And I mean, they were looking in glee to know that, in fact, the kind of bonuses was coming down the road. And performance picked up. We made more money than we ever made before. There's nothing wrong with profits. In this case, you're sharing the profits with the labor.
Yes, indeed.
And that's really what you want. But you're doing it on a formula. Basis. You're doing it based, if you perform, because in that particular category, the price of ammonia is dictated by the international market, not by us. But we have control over productivity, over safety, over various measures. And those are the criteria by which you will determine. Yes, we have to make money, but you are entitled to enjoy some of the benefits. And I think, we really moved a quantum leap. And if that was translated both into the public sector, the civil service, into the port, where my friend is, I think we would see a huge transition.
So that there is this call on whoever, this new administration, that there has to be some fundamental change, Mr. Anisette. There has to be a new, I don't want to use the term new chapter, but there has to be there has to be a refocusing and an understanding of the society. You've always spoken about bread and butter issues, right? And you've always come against this issue of marginalization and seeing one group as against the other. Is it now that you're seeing where we have gotten to the point where probably there's maybe no return, or maybe there is hope somewhere that we can still get to the point of getting some level of equal justice in the society, or are we far removed from that? Is that a possibility?
You're asking where hope is?
Where hope is? Yes.
No. Well. What I will say is that there must be a political will for those changes. And as you rightly said, we hear too much talking the talk, but not walking the talk. Right? And we have had so many studies.
Yes.
And we haven't seen any implementation. And I want to touch the thing about bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is necessary, because that's what drives corruption. You see, we have to be brutally frank. All right, and then when you see all this bureaucracy, right, it is by design to create a particular kind of society and a particular kind of thinking.
But on the other side, sorry to interrupt you, on the other side, it is also said that it is because of a recognition that there is this level of corruption in certain parts of that there is need for a bureaucratic system in a way. When I say bureaucratic, a system that has some levels of checks and balances, which sometimes unfortunately turns into a long, drawn-out bureaucratic system. You wait 2-3 years, to get something done. I think there's another side of it as well. But what I'm trying to get is that how do we ensure that there is a level of accountability, transparency, but at the same time avoiding the bureaucratic system as we have it? Because with bureaucracy, there might be a certain positive where you have certain levels where you have these improper checks and balances, and then at the end of the process you are assured that the thing is good, it can stand scrutiny. But how do we get that balance really?
All right, firstly, let me say, checks and balances is necessary, but the mixing of checks and balances with creative bureaucracy.
Creative bureaucracy. Okay,
right.
I get you.
You understand?
I get you.
No. Yeah. You see, and then
I get you.
have to be brutally frank in the conversations if we have to take Trinidad to another level. All right? And an issue that I continue to raise, no radio station, no TV carry it. Who is financing the PNM head office? Am I, as a citizen, not supposed to understand that and to know that? Right? Who? Because that is what we are talking about in an open, transparent society where you must be able to put everything on the table. Because if you are doing the right thing, there is no need for any fear and to say, well, I haven't done disclosure clause, so I cannot say what is happening. All those things,
and when you have a cabinet meeting, you have several persons have to excuse themselves, recuse themselves.
It's not several. We could count them on our fingers, and not our 5 fingers. All right, and that's a reality in Trinidad which we do not talk about, and until we are honest to confront the real issues that are facing Trinidad, whether it's cultural, whether it is economic, whether it is social, we must set our KPIs. We must determine what we want right for our children, because we are on our way out. So we have to build a better Trinidad for our children. And our responsibility is to ensure that. And just let me answer my friend here. The question of pay for performance, this union, through National Flour Mill, introduced that. This union at Pledeco, right, introduced that. And those were some of the metrics that we would have had this government agree to do the transition that we signed with the UNC government in 2015 for the port. But the port was allowed to run down so that you could go and say, I'm going to privatize it.
So we have some creative bureaucracy.
Yes, right. And that is a playbook that has been written. Nobody wants to talk about Petrochin. Was that a right decision?
Okay.
All right. And so there are so many things that are impacting negatively on how we transition our society to a real democratic,
right. So there
fair
is
society.
right. So that there is a demand on whichever administration to get these things right.
It's not the administration, and you see, we continue to make that mistake. We have to be part of the process. My friend made a fundamental point, and Eric Williams said, no way proportional representation is a dagger in the PNM and back. He know why he was saying. All right, and then we are talking, right, how come in Singapore, where it is so high up in the ladder that we do not have those issues? What can we learn from Singapore? Because Singapore corporatized the operation and they hold people accountable for what happened. We do not see that in our country. Certain people can do what they want without any consequences, and that is a major issue that we have to confront in this country.
Gentlemen, I know we
time finished.
Yes, the time is going by so quickly. But we're talking about we're focusing on the general elections, of course, and of course these other matters are also important, because they are also part of that economic makeup, that governance system. Tomorrow we would have a clear picture of where we are in terms of the election and their choice, and I'm wondering if you have any views on what you think might be some of the key issues in the minds of the population that would have created a particular perspective or view. We have many issues within the society. There's crime and criminality. There is unemployment. There is dislocation. There is, I can sum it up, social injustice, right? What do you think might be in the minds of the population, or would have been in the minds of the population, that maybe would have informed a particular decision? Your Excellency, what are some of those issues you think that may show itself or rear its head tomorrow, representing that vote? Whichever party, and what, because we have listened to both the campaigns, we have listened to what the speeches, we've even had a view, a look at the manifestos, so we know what is on offer.
Yeah. So crime and corruption, I think, is at the very top. If we do not get hold of crime and of corruption, then in fact, nothing else will be achieved. So it has to be a number one target. I don't see how it could be otherwise. And I see corruption being an important part. We talked about the bureaucracy. We talked about creative bureaucracy, which really is corruption. And which is why I say, instead of what people are saying, I deserve more. So I'm willing to give you pay for performance. You deserve more, but I deserve more output,
yes.
Outcomes. I'll pay you for outcomes, not just for inputs, as it were. And that, to my mind, is one way to tackle that particular challenge. But crime is something that we need unless one feels comfortable. How does a businessman decide to invest in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's foreign or local, when he feels that are going to be taxed tomorrow morning because somebody calling me up and say, we want X or Y, or they're outside my business place or whatever. That's a reality that is occurring for many years, not today.
So it's one of many areas for which
and crime, without a doubt, is at the forefront of people's minds. And I didn't hear the PNM suggest how they're going to tackle crime. Frankly, I said, Dr. Rowley said, let me quote him. If the government cannot control crime, the government is part of the problem. He said that when he was leader of opposition. I am telling you, he is dead right. And therefore, the party coming to rescue us from where we're heading into that valley of death has to tackle crime, has to make sure that they do not affiliate, because you become you become intertwined with bandits and gangsters and stuff, and how you're going to control them afterwards if in fact you use them in order to act as mobilization agents for my party. That's what Lloyd Best says, Lloyd Best said Jude really was, and he was talking about Jude back in those days, was a mobilization team to ensure that you win the election. Instead, and what you do is keep people down. Reskilling, retooling, re-engineering has to be the focus. They could have had CPEP, but in the morning period and the afternoon period, we reskill you. At the end of 2 years, you should be able to move out to a new job. Yes, we need to create employment, but sensible employment. And if it's temporary, you need to move on to another area. I remember seeing an interview some years ago where they were interviewing a shooter, as they call it. But he was blindfolded or whatever, they blanked out his face. And he was saying, hey, I didn't have a bad life, My mother and father were both in CPEP. But as I grew up, I said, but I don't want to be in that. And the best choice I had was to become a shooter. And that's how we got into it.
All right.
And so we are losing our people in that particular way. And
All right.
that's the first place I think they need to tackle.
All right. Well, let's, we have actually, run out of time, and I just wanted to get some wrap-up comments from, both of you gentlemen. Mr. Anisette, we've had a vote today. As I said, the population is, waiting with bated breath as to what the results might be. We probably may have already got the results. Let's see. Your final comments when you look back at the campaign and maybe look towards the future for Trinidad and Tobago. Share with us your closing comments.
Right, I just want to say something, and I will disagree with my comrade here because there's a root cause for crime in any society, all right? And I will continue to say the wealth and income inequality in Trinidad and Tobago is frightening. And I'm saying that no society in history has sustained such disparity that I am seeing without systemic rupture within the society. And if you do not address that issue, if you have a society where a few percent benefits and 90% of your society or more has to go under the table for the crumbs, crime will eventually take over your society. So that if you don't stop the inequality, one, we're going to have crime to deal with. Check the history, check it, and you will see that. And we are saying within the trade union movement, our model of economic development has to change towards a new model that speaks to job growth and wage growth. All right. And until we address those two fundamental issues and obviously the social cohesion metrics that I always talk about, it is necessary for us to develop that because there must be this social cohesion in order for us to develop as a society. But I want to emphasize it. Unless we address the wealth and income and household inequality, we're going to be faced with crime and all the other social ills that flows from those kinds of obscene inequality in our society.
Your Excellency, Sanjay has just taken up some of your time. Yes,
well, I think he's dead on spot in terms of job growth and job pay. Has to arise, and I'm saying the way to achieve that is reskilling, upskilling, and pay for performance. I want outcomes. All of us benefit when there are outcomes, and that is in fact which as I said, Mr. Dukran had talked long ago. Trinidad will not rise unless Laventille rises, and therefore we have to in fact ensure that there is that people receive a wage, a living wage, it's the very bottom line that there should be. But everybody should have an opportunity to reach the top. And that means that your education system, your reskilling, your technology have to be dramatically changed and improved.
All right, so there we are. I think we can, gentlemen, we can bring the program to a close. The intention was really to have a general and a broad discussion on not just elections, yes, elections focus, but also touching a bit on some economic matters and the social life of Trinidad and Tobago, looking at where we have been historically and where you believe we should be going, even with the new administration. And I think that it's all in the interest of the public. We need to have these robust. And Mr. Ansett always talks about these brutally frank discussions, right? Whether they are, you can't please everybody.
You have to mash those.
Whatever the discussions are, some people might tend to think that you're on this side and you're not on that side. This program is really about people expressing their views. I talk with many different people, there are many different walks of life, and we discuss issues that impact us here in Trinidad and Tobago, even in the region as well as the world. So I think that it's important for us to continue to have these kinds of discussions. It's the only way that I believe we can really shape a brighter tomorrow. Gentlemen, thank you so much again for coming in.
Pleasure is mine,
Thank you.
and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
I don't know if I have to pay for a longer period, but if I have to pay, I will pay, because these kinds of discussions is too important.
We could always have a conversation. All right. Thank you so much again.
Okay,
Thank you.
my
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Okay, and thanks again, and blessings to Trinidad and Tobago, as I always say. And you know me with my divine master and also my ancestors. We need a spiritual intervention in Trinidad and Tobago as we traverse all that we are experiencing in this country that can be solved with the will and political will, and the people understanding that changes come from them within and not from the politicians.
We can make it if we try.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you once again, gentlemen. And Stephen Cummings, this was a special discussion on not just the general election. Of course, we have been focusing on the general election, and we also touched a bit on matters relative to our economy and looking at where we are and just wanting to see a better society. This program is really to get the views of persons who believe that they do have a voice, and I think it's all part of the democratic process. I'm Stephen Cummings, and I guess I'll be back with you on Wednesday for the Citizens Community Forum. That happens every Wednesday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. See you then.
People like our station.
It's amazing.
We inspire families. We inspire you.
You gotta stop listening. It's real good music.
Our listeners love our station so much, they listen even while they are sleeping.
Okay, hi. I want to go to bed.
This is your blessed, best pioneering station. Isaac 98.1 FM. It's your worship hour. Your worship hour on Isaac.